Let me tell y'all something that y'all don't know.
Khadijah Michelle Brown and Jeremy Brown were both 28 years old at the time of the incident. The couple lived together in an apartment at the Green Tree Apartments on Green Tree Drive in the city of Columbus, Lowndes County, Mississippi. From the outside, they appeared to be just another young family in a quiet neighborhood, like hundreds of others throughout the city. However, according to investigative records and court documents released later, their marriage had been marked by ongoing tension, including prolonged conflicts and previous incidents of domestic violence that had been documented by law enforcement. By the morning of March 25, 2023, as the city of Columbus was beginning an ordinary weekend day, no one could have imagined that the Browns' small apartment would soon become the center of one of Mississippi's most closely watched criminal cases. What set this case apart from an ordinary homicide was not only what happened inside the apartment, but also the way the entire incident unfolded before hundreds of people on social media. At approximately shortly after 7 a.m. on March 25, 2023, the argument between Khadijah Michelle Brown and Jeremy Brown escalated once again inside the apartment. According to information released during the investigation, Jeremy began packing his belongings with the intention of leaving the residence to end the increasingly heated confrontation. During this time, Khadijah used her phone to live stream the argument on Facebook Live, allowing viewers to hear and see part of the initial events as they unfolded. This became one of the case's most significant details and was later collected by investigators as an important piece of evidence. The argument continued as Jeremy prepared to leave the apartment. According to Lowndes County Sheriff Eddie Hawkins, as quoted by multiple news outlets, at some point the phone stopped recording video because it was turned face down or fell out of position, leaving only the audio from the live stream. Viewers could no longer see what was happening inside the apartment, but they could still hear the argument, sounds of a struggle, and the tense atmosphere that continued for several more moments. Moments later, a single gunshot rang out. According to the investigation, Khadijah Michelle Brown used a 9mm semi-automatic handgun to shoot Jeremy Brown inside the apartment. Because the phone's camera was no longer recording video, the live stream did not capture the actual moment of the shooting. However, the sound of the gunshot was broadcast live to those watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our latest videos covering real criminal cases. This detail quickly drew widespread attention and later became a key part of the investigative case file. That was the complete sequence of the criminal act, as confirmed by investigative records and publicly available news reports. What happened after the gunshot marked the stage when law enforcement began responding to the scene and uncovering the full circumstances of the case. Immediately after the gunshot was heard during the live stream, the incident was reported through multiple sources. According to information released by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, at approximately 7:42 a.m. on March 25, 2023, the 911 Emergency Communications Center received a report of a domestic violence incident involving gunfire at the Green Tree Apartments in Columbus. In addition to nearby residents who heard the disturbance, several people watching the Facebook Live broadcast realized something serious had happened when the video disappeared, leaving only chaotic audio before the stream abruptly ended. The information relayed to the emergency dispatcher led dispatch personnel to determine that this was a critical situation requiring an immediate response. Within minutes, law enforcement units were dispatched to the scene to verify the incident and secure the area. Only minutes after receiving instructions from 911 dispatch, Lowndes County Sheriff's deputies arrived at the Green Tree Apartments on Green Tree Drive. Their first priority was to reach the reported apartment, ensure the safety of everyone present, and quickly assess the situation inside. Upon entering the apartment, deputies found an adult male lying motionless with clear signs of a gunshot wound. Law enforcement officers immediately secured the entire area, preventing unauthorized individuals from entering in order to preserve the crime scene and protect potential evidence. At the same time, emergency medical personnel entered the apartment to assess the victim's condition. Based on their initial observations, combined with information obtained from the 911 call and data from the Facebook Live broadcast that investigators quickly secured, detectives determined that this was no longer a routine domestic violence incident, but a suspected homicide that required a full criminal investigation. The apartment was then completely secured so that investigators and forensic personnel could begin the next stages of their work. Once the scene had been secured, detectives and forensic specialists began documenting every piece of evidence remaining inside the apartment. Every item of evidence was marked, photographed, and collected in accordance with standard criminal investigation procedures. Among the most significant pieces of evidence was a 9mm semi-automatic handgun recovered at the scene, along with a spent shell casing and other physical evidence related to the shooting. At the same time, investigators quickly identified and secured the data from the Facebook Live broadcast. Although the video had been interrupted after the phone was turned face down or fell out of position, the audio recording preserved the final sounds before the incident ended. This electronic evidence became one of the most important objective pieces of evidence used to compare with the physical evidence recovered at the scene. Meanwhile, the coroner confirmed that Jeremy Brown had died at the scene from a gunshot wound. The preliminary findings were consistent with the physical evidence and the initial investigative findings collected inside the apartment. Piece by piece, the evidence, including the firearm, the shell casing, the electronic data, and the forensic findings, began to fit together, allowing investigators to reconstruct the events based on evidence rather than speculation. By that point, the direction of the investigation had become increasingly clear. However, to transform the evidence collected at the scene into a case capable of withstanding judicial scrutiny, investigators still needed to complete another critical step: conducting interviews and strengthening the entire chain of evidence. During the morning of March 25, 2023, investigators with the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office formally launched the criminal investigation into the shooting at the Green Tree Apartments. At this early stage, their highest priority was to determine the exact sequence of events, rule out the possibility that additional individuals were involved, and verify all information gathered at the scene through independent sources of evidence. In addition to collecting physical evidence, investigators quickly focused on an unusually rare piece of evidence in a homicide investigation: the Facebook Live broadcast that had taken place immediately before the shooting. According to publicly released information, the live stream data was extracted and preserved as part of the investigation. Although the video feed had been interrupted after the phone was no longer pointed toward the scene, the audio recording continuously captured the sounds leading up to and during the moment the gunshot was fired. Investigators compared this audio timeline with the timing of the 911 call, witness statements, and the evidence collected inside the apartment in order to establish an accurate timeline of the entire incident. At the same time that electronic evidence was being analyzed, investigators thoroughly examined the apartment to determine whether there were any signs of forced entry, the presence of a third party, or any indication that the shooting had been carried out by an unknown intruder. However, the crime scene examination revealed no evidence supporting any of those possibilities. The physical evidence recovered inside the apartment, together with the electronic evidence and the initial information obtained at the scene, consistently pointed the investigation in the same direction. Investigators also continued compiling records of previous occasions when law enforcement had been dispatched to respond to domestic violence incidents involving the couple. These records were not used as substitutes for evidence in the case itself, but they provided important context that helped investigators better understand the relationship between the individuals involved and compare that history with the events of March 25, 2023. By this point, the overall picture of the case had gradually taken shape through multiple sources of evidence: the crime scene, forensic findings, Facebook Live data, the 911 call, and related investigative records. However, to complete the case in accordance with Mississippi law, investigators still needed to take the next decisive step: determining the criminal responsibility of the individual involved through formal legal proceedings. Only a few hours after the gunshot shocked the Green Tree Apartments community, the incident had evolved from an emergency call into an official homicide investigation. After investigators completed their initial processing of the crime scene and secured the necessary evidence, 28-year-old Khadijah Michelle Brown was taken into custody by the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office and formally charged with murder under Mississippi law. The arrest took place on March 25, 2023. According to information released by law enforcement, Brown did not resist arrest, and officers were not required to use any additional force. After the initial procedures were completed, she was escorted from the Green Tree Apartments under law enforcement supervision and transported to the Lowndes County Adult Detention Center for booking. At that time, the investigation was still ongoing, and bond had not yet been set. For investigators, the arrest was not the end of the case, but rather the point at which the investigation formally entered the criminal prosecution phase. All evidence collected from the crime scene, the Facebook Live broadcast, the forensic examination, and subsequent investigative work would still have to undergo further review before being presented to a grand jury. More than 4 months later, in August 2023, the Lowndes County Grand Jury formally returned an indictment charging Khadijah Michelle Brown with murder. From that point forward, the case was no longer simply a family tragedy that had drawn widespread attention on social media. It became a criminal prosecution within Mississippi's judicial system, where all evidence would be examined in open court before a final judgment could be reached. During the following weeks, investigators with the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office continued strengthening the case by reviewing and organizing the entire chain of evidence they had collected. Their objective was not simply to prove that a gun had been fired, but to establish an objective, continuous, and legally sufficient chain of evidence capable of withstanding prosecution in court. One of the most important pieces of evidence was the 9mm semi-automatic handgun recovered at the scene. Crime scene findings and forensic examinations were compared with the firearm and the remaining physical evidence inside the apartment, creating consistency between the physical evidence and the forensic conclusions. In addition, the Facebook Live recording became an exceptionally valuable piece of electronic evidence. Although the phone did not capture the actual moment of the shooting because it had been turned face down or fallen out of position, the audio recording preserved the final moments before the live stream ended. When compared with the timing of the 911 call, the arrival of law enforcement officers, and the evidence recovered at the scene, this recording helped establish a consistent timeline of the incident. In addition to the physical evidence and electronic data, investigators compiled witness statements and other investigative records in accordance with established criminal procedure. When all of these sources of evidence were examined together, they did not exist as isolated pieces, but instead complemented and corroborated one another, forming a closely connected body of evidence. It was the consistency between the firearm, the crime scene, the forensic findings, the Facebook Live recording, and the investigative records that provided the basis for submitting the case to the Lowndes County Grand Jury. In August 2023, after reviewing the evidence presented by investigators, the grand jury formally returned an indictment charging Khadijah Michelle Brown with murder. From that point, the case officially entered the trial phase within Mississippi's judicial system. More than a year after the shooting, the case returned to the Lowndes County Circuit Court for what would become its most decisive stage. Gone were the chaotic scenes of the morning of March 25, 2023. Instead, the courtroom was filled with a solemn and heavy atmosphere. All eyes were focused on the moment when Mississippi's justice system would deliver its final conclusion in the case that had drawn widespread public attention. On May 24, 2024, Khadijah Michelle Brown formally pleaded guilty to the charge of second-degree murder. By entering a guilty plea, the case did not proceed to a jury trial as originally anticipated. Instead, it moved to the sentencing phase, during which the court determined the appropriate punishment under Mississippi law and the terms of the plea agreement. After reviewing the case file and accepting the guilty plea, the judge sentenced Brown to 40 years in prison. Under the sentence, she is required to serve 34 years in the custody of the Mississippi Department of Corrections, followed by 6 years of post-release supervision after her release from prison. This judgment officially concluded the criminal proceedings at the trial court level. The moment the sentence was handed down also marked the beginning of a completely different chapter in the case. What had begun as an argument inside an apartment and a Facebook Live broadcast ultimately ended with a prison sentence spanning decades. For the justice system, this marked the conclusion of the prosecution. But for both families, the losses and lasting consequences of the case would continue long after the courtroom doors had closed. As the case gradually came to a close with the sentence imposed in May 2024, discussions on social media and in news reports also began to fade. Even so, it remains one of the cases many people remember because of one rare and deeply unsettling detail. Part of the tragedy unfolded while a Facebook Live broadcast was still streaming. Thousands of people first learned about the case not through witness accounts or crime scene photographs, but through reports of a live stream that unexpectedly became evidence in a homicide investigation. Across online forums and social media, many people expressed shock at how quickly a domestic argument could escalate into an irreversible tragedy. Others questioned whether the outcome might have been different if the conflict had been resolved earlier or if timely intervention had occurred. Although opinions varied, much of the discussion centered on domestic violence, recognizing warning signs, and the importance of seeking help before conflicts spiral beyond control. Publicly available sources do not document any official statements from the families of Jeremy Brown or Khadijah Michelle Brown following the sentencing. Likewise, there is no indication that the sentence generated significant public controversy. After Khadijah Brown pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 40 years in prison, including 34 years of incarceration and 6 years of post-release supervision, the case was, for the most part, legally concluded. However, for many who followed the case, the sentence closed only the legal file. It could not erase the consequences left behind by the tragedy. One man lost his life. One woman now faces decades behind bars. And two families continue to live with irreversible loss. For that reason, the case of Khadijah Michelle Brown continues to be remembered as a warning about the consequences of violence in intimate relationships and the unpredictable reach of social media when a private tragedy unexpectedly becomes a public event. At this point, the entire legal process of the case had come to an end. From the 911 call on the morning of March 25, 2023, through the investigation, prosecution, and ultimately the sentencing in May 2024, Mississippi's justice system reached its final resolution after Khadijah Michelle Brown pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Legally, the case has reached a clear conclusion. Yet for many who followed it, there are still important questions worth considering. In your opinion, did the 40-year sentence, with 34 years to be served in prison followed by 6 years of post-release supervision, appropriately reflect the seriousness of the offense? Does the fact that the case ended with a plea agreement rather than a full jury trial change the way you view justice in this case? If the case had proceeded through a complete trial, do you think the final outcome might have been different? What are your thoughts on the role of Facebook Live in this case? How did the fact that part of the incident was recorded and later became evidence affect both the investigation and public perception? Was social media simply an unintended repository of evidence, or does this case raise broader questions about responsibility, privacy, and the consequences when a deeply personal tragedy suddenly becomes an event witnessed by thousands of people? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every perspective deserves to be heard, provided it is expressed with respect for everyone involved, respect for the facts of the case, and a spirit of constructive discussion. We will read every comment and look forward to discussing this case with you from a variety of perspectives. Some cases are remembered because of the sophistication of the offender. Others are remembered because of manhunts that lasted for years. But the case of Khadijah Michelle Brown and Jeremy Brown leaves behind a different impression. Everything happened so quickly. In an incredibly short period of time, a family argument ended with one person losing his life, another facing decades in prison, and two families carrying losses that can never be undone. What makes this case particularly thought-provoking is that the tragedy did not occur in a distant place or under extraordinary circumstances. It happened inside their own home, a place that should have been the safest. It serves as a reminder that conflicts within close relationships, if left unchecked or if help is not sought in time, can escalate far more quickly than many people realize. Some decisions are made in only a matter of seconds, yet their consequences can last for decades. And for those left behind, sometimes for the rest of their lives. The case also reflects a reality of the digital age. A single phone broadcasting a Facebook live stream turned a private tragedy into an event witnessed by the public. Social media can preserve crucial evidence for investigators, but it cannot prevent a tragedy from happening, nor can it change what occurred just moments before. Technology can record the truth, but it cannot undo a decision that has already been made. Ultimately, what remains after this case is not the length of the sentence or the attention it received on social media. It is the cost of a single moment of lost control. One person permanently lost the chance to return home to his family. Another will spend most of her remaining years behind bars. And behind them are family members who will continue living with the memories of the morning of March 25th, 2023. Perhaps the greatest lesson from this case is found not inside the courtroom, but in the choices people make when facing conflict. Some words can be taken back. Some disagreements will eventually pass. But once violence enters the picture, every opportunity to make things right can disappear in an instant. It is a mistake that no sentence, no matter how severe, can truly undo. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you found this content informative, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest true crime cases. What are your thoughts on this case? Share your opinion in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.